a lot of people are enjoying the sun, but they said, please send it to us. So we are a small group, but we are a passionate group. And so ladies, this is, share with us what you would like, and you can decide which way you want to go, who starts, who talks about it, but it's your stage and I'm going to be quiet. From Spaceship Central.
Well, I'm going to let Kea go first because I live in Ireland and there is a lot of elemental energy in the land, but Kea lives it on a daily basis. And so I'm going to let Kea go first and see if I'm inspired with anything, because at the moment I'm sort of sitting here going, gosh, I have no idea what to talk about, because and I'm afraid I haven't been doing a huge amount of work with archetypes. So anyway, I'm going to go silent. My name is Anne, and I live in Ireland in the center of the country, and I'm about 10 miles due south from one of the most seminal sacred sites in Ireland, which is sort of, there's a major sacred site here, and if this is the east coast, there's one here that had an ancient path to it. The west coast had an ancient path to it. The north had an ancient path to it, and the south had an ancient path. So I'm literally in a very sacred space in the center of Ireland, but I'll allow them to let me know what they want to bring forward. But for the moment, I'm going to pass you back to Kea. Okay, thanks a million.
That, Annie, just that on itself is so beautiful. Thank you so much. What an introduction. Thank you.
Well, I have to say that Anne's entirely modest, which you all will discover. Simply sometimes I think I function more in the conscious realm about the nature spirits, whereas her working is so native and so deep and so enriched by the landscape of Ireland, which carries one of the most whole, I'm going to say pieces of the mirror for any, for all of you, of that realm. Like it is the least, I feel it's some of the least disturbed, most whole landscape that holds the nature spirit. So Anne will feel like she doesn't know because it's almost so natural to her. She doesn't realize she knows. That's what I'm going to say about Anne. And she always astonishes me. She came to Glastonbury to help me, and she ended up over at the Red Spring over at Telliswell, and she's channeling all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, Anne, like, how beautiful are you? So I'm Kea. My home is in Denver, Colorado, and my connection is here in Glastonbury in the UK. And I've been here. I made my first trip to Glastonbury in 2002, and everything changed my life. Actually, my life changed right on 9/11 in 2001. And so that's a bit of a story, but I might share some of that with you. But first, I'm just going to set a container for what I talked to Alessandra about, which is I said, I don't know what I'm going to say either. And I like, this is not I don't come ready to talk about nature spirits. I said, but I'm always ready to play. So I'm here to play, and Anne can play too. And she's a great playmate.
And I'm just going to ask you to turn your head around so that people can see what you're wearing. Okay.
Or you want to see my ears? Is that all right, Anne? You have to be my art director.
Your hair is in the way. Pull your hair back, my love.
All right.
Now they can see your ears.
There you go. And I didn't even take the time to put them in properly. But so they're different if you can see them. And they're Dom and Hurrian. Ranyo made them. They're my second set because my first set had a mysterious journey the way Selphika does. They ended up in the care of someone who then died. And in the ensuing chaos, they then vanished. So that's the story behind those. So this is my second pair, and it was clear to me they needed to be up-leveled from the first. They need more consciousness in them. So they are in sacred language, and the message of them is, as best I can remember it, essentially it is the mission of our soul to communicate and listen to the realms, to the nature spirits, and bring that knowledge and wisdom to humanity. So that's the intention behind my little fairy ears, which I adore. As I said, I came in, this, you're gonna love this. So I'm racing because I realized it's almost 5, and I'm racing around the slope of the tour to get back to where I'm staying, because I've spent all day building a fairy garden at the White Spring. And maybe I'll put on, it still has to download a few pictures from my phone, and I didn't take many, but I can maybe show you a few pictures of, of the little fairy garden that's in progress. So I go, well, I guess I must have something to do with this. So I would like to share a little bit about my definitions, you know, what the fairy realm is to me, what nature spirits are to me, what might be good for you all to encompass in your definition, working archetypally. And this photosynthesis idea, Alessandra, I'm fascinated. So I'm going to set the base, and then I'm going to come back around to it, because all of a sudden it's pinging some things from my history, and I'm going like, wonder if that isn't something of an archetype, but I don't know. So anyway, we'll play. So for me, a nature spirit is a particular aspect of the fairy realm. Our job as a nature spirit is we take kind of the divine blueprint, the divine archetype in a way, of a landscape or a place or even a home or a relationship. It doesn't matter. We're going to operate the same way no matter where we're operating. But it's to take kind of that larger I'm in Plato's world now, and he would say the archetype or the ideal. And our job is to turn it into form, to have it show up in the physical. So that's what nature spirits do. We tend the forms. So when we have a plant, that plant will always have a nature spirit attending it, because that's how the plant stays alive, like it's its invisible half. And it's, you know, without the nature spirit, the plant wouldn't be able to grow and develop and have the beauty that it has. So I consider that nature spirits have a symbiotic relationship with form. And I don't want to make it sound like it's limited. You know, we mostly think about it in the context of gardens and plants. However, I feel like what I'm describing is just a particular skill set or a particular focus or a particular interest. And that is, how do I translate something invisible into something beautiful here? And how do I sustain it and maintain it over time and interact with it? And the 2 examples that have formed my vision of nature spirits really have been Findhorn in Scotland. And if you don't know any of these things, I can put them on the chat. You know, any names or anything, you can just let me know. So I began in my journey in Findhorn on 9/11, believe it or not, in 2001. And there was a whole series of synchronicities that would take the whole hour to share. And Anne, I'm sure, has similar stories. But let me just say that at the moment I think that the towers fell, I was sitting in a tree in a very sacred place in Findhorn, which is in northern Scotland, in a very thin-veiled place called Randolph's Leap. And I had one of the most striking experiences of my human existence, which is when I sat in that tree, I had an experience of merging with the tree, into the tree. And I mean, I've always liked trees, but it wasn't like that. It was like almost being part of the tree. And I was in this daze when we got back on the bus to go back to the place at Findhorn where we were staying. And I remember, because as we pull up, this group of about 10 others of us are running up to the bus, and all I can hear them saying is, "Have you heard? Have you heard?" And we're like going, "Heard what?" You know, I've heard a tree talking to me. So they go, "The towers have fallen." So they fill us all in on 9/11. But I often think world cataclysmic events are also spiritual awakenings. So I think COVID likewise is a spiritual awakening because it's so profoundly strong. But it was for me, and every trail that's gone forward in my life has really been built on that moment in Findhorn. For example, because we couldn't go home because the planes were still getting sorted, and I actually had a ticket to fly on the first day the planes were flying, and I was flying through Dulles, which was one of the places that the planes had hit. I was like, I could end up stranded in London, ugh, you know? And my friend goes, well, you know, don't leave Findhorn. And I was like, oh. And there was one of the three founders, Dorothy McLean, who, along with Peter and Eileen Caddy, founded Findhorn. So that triad. Well, Dorothy McLean happened to be there that coming week that I would have stayed for, teaching a course. And I would have loved to have gotten in it, but it had been booked for 6 months solid. So I'd like, nah, forget it. But because there was that three of us Americans sort of stranded, she let us into the class. So instead of being 30, we were now 33 people in the class. And of all the topics, and this has been set 6 months in advance, remember? It was on reconciling light and dark in wholeness. This is 9/11. I'm like, but this is a little lead into the story, because I walk into the intro event, we're all standing around looking, you know, like high schoolers or middle schoolers at our first dance, you know, not sure if we want to talk to anybody. And we have our little hello, I am name tags on. And this man makes an absolute beeline across the room to me. And he says to me, where did you get your name? And I'm kind of like, my parents gave it to me. Like, why? And there is a story to my name, but this is not the interesting one. The interesting one is the one he told me, because what he told me was, he said, did you know? We said, no, actually, he said to me, stand right there, don't move. And I'm like, but that's very odd. So he runs out of the room. He comes back in about 5 minutes later carrying a road atlas. And he says, I want to show you that there are 3 places in Cornwall, in England, that bear your name. So he shows me Old Key, Porthkey, and Key. Now that's pronounced that way, but it's spelled just like my name. And he said, when you come back, I'll take you there. And that's one of the things that brought me back and that anchored me in. So it was quite a magical journey. And I have to say that you all must be a powerful group. And you all must have called something in, because I'm now good, because here Alessandra has set this meeting, this sacred appointment for us all to come together. And something very magical happened in the last 2 days that quite ties into Findhorn and my first experience at 9/11 with my tree. That's why I'm telling you this story. So about 3 years ago, I have another place I live that's a permaculture garden near the spring. And I met Susie there, Susie Martineau. And she was just starting to channel and to work with listening to trees and tree-human communication. And she did my first session with me, and I was completely gobsmacked and blown away, all the messaging that she gave me. Of course, I forgot what it was at this point. So yesterday I was walking up the tour and I hear a voice go, hi. And of all people, it's Susie, who now doesn't live around Glastonbury, but lives like 4 hours north. So she says, well, we really, you know, let's try to catch up. And I said, well, I can catch up tomorrow a little bit because I was free. So just as we were finishing the fairy garden at the spring, Susie shows up and she says, come, I want you to come, and Sophie Knock, who's one of the guardians of the Red Spring of Chalice Well across the road. And she just channels all this information again from the springs to us and you know, to me and Sophie. And then we walk into Chalice Well Garden. And so we're, of course, making our connections with these huge, huge, magnificent yew trees that are the anchor point of Chalice Well, 2 of them. And she finishes her beautiful connections, and I was just exquisite. And then she turns to me and she goes, the yew trees think that you should be working with them more. Do you work with the yew trees enough? I go, well, not a lot. No, she said, they need to be working with you. And she said, she said, they're very clear and direct. I go, okay, well, I'm good with direct. She said, be careful what you say. I said, oh, okay. I said, with ease and grace. So we were all laughing. So I managed to get all this sort of information from the invisible realms today through Susie, from both the waters and the trees. And it can't be coincidence, my dear Alessandra, that you called us all in together. So I think you were creating something here, you all. So I just want to acknowledge the beauty of the space and the invitation to just come play, because now I can tell you that story. So that's Findhorn, which is an extraordinary story. I encourage you to look up Findhorn. It's gone through many growth processes, but they were one of the first where humans and nature spirits work directly together. And it's quite fun. Peter Caddy's job, the husband, who was kind of the hands on the ground and making sure everything happened, well, Eileen channeled and Dorothy spoke to the plants. She spoke to all the nature spirits. That was her gift. Peter had to cover for them. So when people said, why are you growing tomatoes that are the size of a basketball? And how are you growing strawberries that are the size of an apple? He had to go, it's in the compost. We just make really good compost here. They're growing things on beach sand in Scotland. I mean, really seriously. But the answer is that there was a webbing between the nature spirits and Dorothy in particular, because she could see them and she could talk to them. And they were so excited that humans would talk to them that they would call in things that the garden needed, and they organized it. Okay, so that's Findhorn. The other place I really want you to be aware of is Perelandra, which is in Virginia and is under the care of Michelle. I see she signs herself Michelle Wright now, but I know her as Michelle Smallwright. And when Anne's speaking, I'll put all this in the chat so you have the right spellings and you have some websites that you can check out. So Perelandra is the US version of, I'm going to say, a nature spirit garden. Michelle also, like Dorothy McLean, communicates with the nature spirits. And she was the one, her writings, I've not worked with her directly, but she's the one from which I learned something most important about working with nature spirits. And kind of how I get my notion of what a nature spirit is. She said, it's a collaborative relationship. She calls it co-creative science. So humans have a role, nature spirits have a role, and together we create a garden. So she says, essentially, the humans have 3 jobs. They set the direction of the garden, like what's it supposed to do? Like, where's it supposed to end up? Like, so if we're setting a vegetable garden, our direction would be something very simple. Like, my direction is, I would like to produce enough healthy food to feed my family of 4. Like, that's a direction. So the nature spirits go, right, got it. And then you need to set sort of the container for it, the way of working. You need to fill them in on kind of what you're able to do. Like, it'll be me working in the garden. It'll be sometimes my friends, that sort of definitional thing. And then you need to define your roles and who you are. So you the humans set the base, because the nature spirits are very happy to collaborate, but they need to know what the design is. Essentially, at that point, we're in the Deva mode. We're setting the blueprint and the archetype. And then our job is to surrender and let go and work with the nature spirits, who then direct us. So that was what Michelle and Dorothy were both brilliant at, was they could hear the spirits and listen to them. So the nature spirits might say, for example, get up at 4 a.m. on the dark moon and put in the carrot seeds. And they would go out on the dark moon and they would plant the carrot seeds. I don't know about Dorothy McLean, but I love Michelle Smallwright's stories, because she says that she had to finally tell the nature spirits that nature spirits worked differently than humans, because humans actually got tired and required sleep. So she said, right, I'll do whatever you say, but here are my working hours. These are my boundaries. So again, that's part of the job of humans. You know, it's two different worlds learning to dance together, to collaborate. So I think with that, there's much to talk about in the fairy realm, but for today, I'm going to just talk about nature spirits. And I think that gives you a great bandwidth. I'm going to add one more piece, and then I'm going to turn it over to Anne and let her add to that and embroider that and put it in from her side. So when you said photosynthesis, I'm going to list a couple of books. I'm going to list several books. One of my favorites is called Summer with the Leprechauns by Tanis Hollowell. And she also wrote Pilgrimage with the Leprechauns. And these are true stories. We may or may not believe them, but they're great. Especially Summer with the Leprechauns is super fun to read. And one of the things I learned from that book was, because she could see it, it's a lot about seeing nature spirits as having the high frequency to do it. That's why children can do it. There you go. She's got it. Nice work, Anne. We're a team. The beautiful thing about that I learned about leprechauns, and which I think is also true of nature spirits, is like photosynthesis, they do something similar. They live on the essence of food and plants. They don't actually consume the density. And my feeling is it's possible for us humans that we have forgotten, but we once had the capacity to be nourished without the destruction that our current way of nourishment requires. And I had a magical moment at Agni Dove in Domenher one day when we were walking the labyrinths, and I was in communication with the trees. I don't consider that I'm much of a channel or that I get information, but somehow it pops in occasionally. And the language, or it was so beautiful, and I wrote it down, but I can't remember it. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, while you were still examining your tiny fingers and your toes, we were suckling you, and we were enveloping you, and we were caring for you. And so they were really saying to me, long before you had any consciousness of us or anything else, we've been your carers. And it was such a lovely thing. And I could really feel in that moment that we could be fed simply by their essence. And that I was probably fed as a child by their essence. And that was part of our nourishment pattern. So I sometimes have wondered, because I had a friend become a breatharian when she lived with me, and I've been interested in sun gazing, and, I've tried to end eating all my life because there's something in me that thinks it's barbaric. Whether maybe that isn't something that was part of our archetype that we've lost, and that would be very useful to recover, because it would be more planet friendly if we didn't, if we could be nourished in ways that the plant could give to us and we could take, but without depleting it, much as oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged, that this would happen, but on a much more, and maybe we need to be in an entirely different kind of physical body for that to happen. I don't know. So those are that's my 2 cents worth on the matter. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne now and give her half an hour or whatever. And I'm going to put some things in the chat for you. And then we can, depending on the time frame, we can come back round, Alessandra.
I just want to ask, guys, should we have questions now for you, Kea, or should we wait for Anne and then we'll do it all together? This is a democratic platform. What do you think, guys? Do you have some questions for Kea? No. I just want to point out a couple of things you said that marked me. Thank you for saying, we ended up with this group after we took this course with Coyote and with A Vengeance. We got to do this. We got to, really, we were like mad. We knew we had to do it. So we know there's something behind us, we're just following the crumbs. But you said something that touched me, and I definitely want to elaborate it, that the nature spirits have possibly the perception of the archetype, what needs to be constructed, and then they help and they collaborate with us to get us to that ultimate archetype construction of that, of whatever it is we're doing, a garden. But it doesn't need to be. It could also be ourselves, right? Could also be ourselves and as an evolved being.
Well, that's a really interesting thing, but yeah, I don't see why not. Michelle Smallwright's work, if you look at her co-creative science, all the workbooks and everything, and she calls them conings, and she said you tend everything as if it's a garden. And I've often heard that the body itself is an elemental. Like we actually inhabit an elemental. So we would have our own nature spirits.
Right.
So what you just pinged for me, which I hadn't thought of till you said this, I go, right. So if somehow the garden that we created to work with the nature spirits on was a garden whose purpose and direction was to help us understand better our own archetype, by seeing it in form. See, because it's often the way this is a really bad metaphor, but it's the only one that's coming to me now. Like, I think of the image of a football stadium where everybody walks in and there's a piece of paper laying flat down on their seat, face down. And that at a certain time, everybody's invited to pick up their piece of paper and hold it up. And only at that moment does the whole, by a camera seeing the whole stadium, do you see what's revealed, the image, the message. And I feel like the form world often functions that way, that the form world, we can't see it because we're like the ants. We're moving around, we're doing these things, and the limitation is the expansion of our perception. So sometimes, though, by the time it gets enough of its pieces, like this is where I think a lot of us, and I'm sure everybody in this group, I would be shocked if somebody didn't share this. Do you just find yourself going somewhere and doing these things and you wonder why in the world you're doing them?
Yeah.
Is that for most of us, is that a yes?
Yeah.
So I think our lives consist of being awfully like a nature spirit. I think we're always in nature spirit mode, every one of us floating around. Maybe there's some that aren't, but we float around, we put these pieces together. So then in your archetypal study, it's just to see if we can get a more clear map, like the synchronic lines, of the pieces that everybody's putting together. So it begins to show up in a design and we go, oh, so that's what we were building.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm going to throw in one tidbit that I'm not going to spend long with, but it was fascinating for me that there were photographs from the White Spring, water sample photographs done in Emoto style. When we built the garden at the White Spring, we located items in the garden that aligned with that photo from a water sample from 2 years earlier.
Wait. Say that again. Say I skipped that. Hold on. Say that again. I think it was profound, but I missed it.
That's all right. Well, it's you have to track a lot of things really fast because I'm moving us really fast. So someone took a water sample from the White Spring. They had it frozen and photographed.
Okay.
That water sample was from 2017. We built the garden in 2019, but I find this man shows up at the doorstep with these pictures and is showing me. And I looked at one of the pictures and I was like, oh my God, we put these bowls in the garden and you've got a water picture that has little circles right where we put those bowls. Like,
oh my
what's the
God.
possibility of that?
Okay.
So water actually carries memory, but see, water may also be carrying the archetypes. This is what I'm trying to say.
Well,
because
it's the fractal.
It seemed to already know what we would be doing. And then all I did when I got there was I was like, well, it feels like it needs this and it feels like it needs that. And this feels right. And that's okay. And
you designed exactly what the water molecule was. Okay, did you get that? Let that sink in, guys. 2 years. So then is the blueprint changeable, mutable, or the blueprint's always there? Just we need to upgrade to get to the highest potential level of it.
My sense is an archetype never changes.
Right.
An archetype is like a principle, it's universal. However, because we're human, we are likely to only get to certain perceptions of the archetype.
Yes.
And our perceptions should always be kept loose and always able to change, because we will probably never fully grok the archetype. So even anything we ever get to is a finger pointing at the moon. And, you know, even my interpretation, that's what the water told me, that's my interpretation. So it's a need for, I think, great humility and fluidity like water, and not collapsing anything and thinking, you know, that what we call an archetype actually is the archetype. But I do think that, just like I'm saying with humans finding a direction and a purpose, I think it can guide more and more and more into our expansion of perception. And so we can come closer.
Yeah.
And if I can just say, water does not work in time. Human beings are the only ones for which time is in existence in the way we think of it. So water doesn't have time. So.
But wait, if it's in the material world, if it's manifesting in matter, is it not impacted by those 8 laws? I
can't answer that question, but my sense, particularly with water, because it's one of the things that I have the closest relationship with, is that it is not working. Time is a human
construct. Yeah.
Construct. Yes, there is time in nature in that it follows rhythms of its own.
Right.
But there's no such thing as past, present, future.
No, you're right, because we're coming in and out of existence every 4 seconds, right? Like we are just framework on top of framework, right? I just got attached. I'm going to stay quiet, but you're absolutely right.
I love how excited you get.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Oh my God, Kea, thank you. Oh my God, I feel we're collaborators with nature. I love it. Okay, so I have no more questions. I love the photosynthesis. Oh my God, we're going to work on that. And then the acid. And you're not going to believe this, guys. Today, I'm heading to BC, and I'm thinking, if I have to pack up my house, I have this huge tree in my house. Let me see if I can show it to you guys. Oh no, I won't be able to show it because I've got this, but I have a huge tree. I don't know if I can show it to you. No, because I have this backdrop. So I have this huge tree, and I was thinking I might have to call Paralandra to see what essence I can put in my plant so I can move her and she's not going to be upset. And you bring Paralandra. So I have
I'm just now about to post that. So yeah, I didn't know how much I work with other things you've done. So forgive it.
I have not. I used to work with the Paralandra essences 20 years ago. I have not thought of them in 20 years. And this morning I thought of it because I thought how I was going to move my big plant. So yeah, there's definitely, woo, I feel it. Thank you, Kea. That was brilliant. And then I'm sure we'll come back to you. And Anna, you ready? I think Van is ready to go.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I've been to Finhorn, and I also worked with Paralandra essences, and Janice Halliwell is living in BC, and she's an acquaintance of mine.
Oh, fantastic. Well, then you already have have the webbing to do this. And now all we've done is we've brought them into form. So we've just turned up our little cards in the stadium, and you're all pinged. And so now you know where to go. Do
you think you can get her? We can get her to do a little Zoom call with us and share with us some stuff. And Kea, Annie, I'll invite you.
That'd be great. I would love it, because I love that book.
Eva, do you think you could organize a little get together?
Yeah, I can. I don't know how to get a hold of her, but I have a friend who is closer than I am with her, and I'm sure I can get the info for you.
Okay, Annie, Kea, I'll let you know when we get that, and we'll do a nice little beautiful. And Annie, I can feel you're ready to go now. the messages are coming in.
Well, I'm just amused because almost everything that I would have brought to the party, like Paralandra, and I haven't actually been to Findhorn, but I have read an awful lot by them. I used to live for 10 years on the island where Thomas Halliwell's book, Summer with the Leprechauns, is based. And it's a small island off the west coast of Ireland called Achill Island. And it is a highly active place, is all I can say. The island itself has another tiny island off that called Achill Beg. Now, beg in the Gaelic language means small. It's just 3 letters, B-E-G. And Achill Beg is literally a small rock just off the coast. Unfortunately, you can't walk out there because the tidal stream is so strong. So you can only get out by boat at the lowest, or at that when the tides are high enough to bring a boat in and out. And I suppose I used to just wander around the world connecting to things, but I didn't have a clue that I was connecting to things until I met Tantramat. And I met Tantramat, I think back in 2009, 2010. I have no recollection of how I got to her. But my experience was that I thought that, well, firstly, I had no idea what she was talking about. So I kept going on these telephone calls, and I would hear this woman speaking gobbledygook, and I had no idea what she was saying, but something in me just kept bringing me back, bringing me back, bringing me back. Now, I've done lots and lots of other sort of spiritual work, if you like, because I have worked with sound for many, many years with an English woman called Chloe Goodchild. So I was doing her work called The Naked Voice. And prior to that, I'd done a huge amount of rebirthing after a hysterectomy in my 20s following cancer. And, you know, so I'd been traveling along, but kind of not really deeply engaging in anything except the sound, because that spoke to me at a very, very, very deep level. So anyway, I start on these telephone calls with Tantramat, and then she was involved when I first met her with a project that, Alessandra, you may have become aware of when last year, when a group of people from Tantramat's group went to Mount Shasta to build a spiral, a Damanhurian spiral. I don't know how many of the rest of you were aware of that piece. But that was kind of like almost a culmination of 10 years of work that she called the Mimsy Project because of these beings that she met. But that was what drew me into Tantra, was the Mimsy Project. The hairs on my legs are standing up as I speak, so there's something going on. Anyway, so and even though I had no idea, as I said, what she was talking about, when she started talking about the Mimsies and this whole thing, something in me was just glued to it. I just had to be there. And then in 2013, 3 years or 2 years later, whatever it was, I knew that I had to be on the land in Mount Shasta. And I have no idea where the money came from. I just found myself going there. Met with these group of people. I had, in the meantime, Tantra had come to Ireland, which is where I met Kea first. Tantra had come to Ireland she used to take people on vision quests to Ireland. And she would take them to not just the ancient sacred sites, but to the places, the thin places, and to places where she, over the years, had been. Tantra talks about Ireland and the being, you see, I'm hesitant to call them nature spirits, even though I know that that's who you're referring to. But the beings of the land of Ireland woke Tantra up into who she is now, basically. And she had a very, very profound experience. There's a dolphin that has been living in the bay in the south of Ireland, southwest of Ireland, straight out into the Atlantic in a part of Ireland called Kerry. And there's a small village right at the bottom of the country, almost the last place before you head off to America, and it's called Dingle. And there's a very famous dolphin that's been living there for many, many years, upwards of like 20, 25, 30, I would think. And named Fungi. Now, of course, the Irish are such cynics that they reckon that Fungi goes off and has a few offspring and sends somebody back every couple of years, you know, to change out the guard. But anyway, Fungi has been known as Fungi for these 25 or 30 years. And Tantra, who was Diane at the time, had a very, very profound experience. She went swimming with the dolphin and almost drowned, and the dolphin pushed her back to the shore. And when she came around, she was in a state of utter ecstasy and bliss, but she was hypothermic and everybody was trying to save her life. And when she came around, she kept hearing these words and she didn't even know what they were. And the words were Tantra and Mat. And she finally looked them up and figured out that Mat was the, help me out here, Kay, was the justice and the balance, and the Tantra, well, you all know what the Tantra is.
Yeah,
So,
well, the union of heaven and earth is what she would say the Tantra
Yeah.
is. It's the
But
so
it-
above, so below.
yeah. And so the that experience from Tantra, it took her a number of years. I can't remember how many, but I think it was at least 5, if not 10, for her to actually own what she had been given in that experience, which was this name and what it represented. So in the meantime, she was coming to Ireland to do a vision quest, and I went off on a journey with her. And that is the first experience I had of figuring out that, according to everybody else around me, I was deeply connected to stuff that I wasn't even conscious I was connected to. So yeah, I just have, also to go back, when I was in Shasta, I had a very powerful experience one day. One of my connections to the nature realm is crystal. I have even come to the awareness of this body being a crystal bowl, that we have silica in our bodies, and when I use my voice in a particular way, it literally charges every particle of the body, and it sings like a crystal bowl. So when we were in Mount Shasta, we were taken to have an experience with a woman who was really a master with crystal bowls. And from the moment I walked into that woman's room till the moment I left Mount Shasta, I was in a completely altered state, in connection with beings, spirits, energetics that I have no language for other than just sort of describing experiences. So, but one of the very profound things that happened, we had this extraordinary sound bowl experience, where I actually experienced myself as something other than a physical human body. I was in such a state of altered reality that I almost forgot that I was supposed to go snowshoeing with a large group of people who were going into the woods. And the woman who owned the shop wouldn't let me out unless I sat on her pyrite. She had a huge pyrite stool and she made me sit on it for about 15 minutes because I just couldn't ground. And but so anyway, in this kind of state of sort of, it was better than smoking marijuana, I just floated up the road, and everybody else had spent ages being there on time and having their snowshoes, right sizes and right posts and right whatever, and I just floated in and went, whoops, I'm late, oh sorry. And everything just happened seamlessly. We went up into the mountain and they took us into this clearing, and I'll never forget, we were in a dense wood on the mountain, and we're snowshoeing through this place, and there's nothing that I could go there and say today that I recognize it, except when we got to this group of trees. It was a huge circle, natural circle, entirely dotted with these huge fir trees. And right at the very, very top of what I'll call the entrance, there was this face of a crone. And I actually have a photograph of it, so I didn't imagine it. There's a face of a crone, a really strong face of a crone, way up, probably about 30 feet up the tree. And we were taken in there, and this woman was sort of getting us to do a meditation, and I literally fell into the center of the earth. And I had a meeting with some beings that I wasn't particularly in the mood to have, and proceeded to shout at them. And I mean, it sounds so appalling when I think back on it. But anyway, I had all sorts of questions. We were currently trying to leave Achill Island, and we were trying to find a place to live. And we were 2.5 years into a 5-year search. And we were pissed off, we were fed up, we were getting, you know, we didn't know where to go, where we were to be. And rather than just acknowledging that we would be told and to trust the process, I was getting very irate and frustrated. And so when I dropped down in front of these beings, I just started yelling at them. Like, where the fuck are we supposed to go? What the fuck are we supposed to do? In traditional Irish, fuck this, fuck that form, excuse me. And I got, most of it I don't remember, but what I do remember were 3 pieces of information that I was given. The first thing they said to me was, it is yours to heal the heart of Ireland. And with that, I started roaring, laughing and going, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm going to heal Ireland's heart. And I ranted on about that for a while. And then the next piece of information was, I said, well, how the hell am I going to recognize this place when I see it? And I was told, you will be given a key. And I had a really powerful vision of a very old rusted latch key placed into my third eye. And of course, I went off on esoteric mumbo jumbo. I don't understand any of that bullshit. Give me plain language. I'm a simple person. Stop giving me all this highfalutin garbage about keys and codes and blah, 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 blah. So I dissed that off too. And then the final piece, when I was coming away, was I had the grace finally to say thank you. And I said, but how will I know? And I just heard, you will know. And I completely forgot all about that conversation. I completely forgot everything about it. I remember on the evening coming down and reporting back, because we would have little sessions where we'd all describe what we'd experienced in the day. And after that, I literally completely forgot it, like it never had happened, until the place where I live suddenly showed up out of the blue. We'd been searching 5 years. We knew everything. Ireland is a very small place, and there are only 2 or 3 websites with land and houses on them. We literally were able to talk to each other like, well, what about the one with the red door that we saw in Carlow? Or what about the one with the tree in the garden? And the, you know, we literally knew every single thing on these websites. And suddenly this piece of land came up, and we'd kind of given up. We'd almost bought a house. And then discovered that that whole county had been zoned for wind farming. And we just suddenly went, oh my God. And we actually had to cancel. We were just about to pay the deposit and we had to cancel, which we both felt really bad about. And again, without realizing that I was being given very specific direction I wasn't paying any attention to, which unfortunately has been a habit of mine over the years. So anyway, my husband Robert saw this piece of property and asked me would I drop by it one day. I was giving a sound workshop on the other side of the country, and he told me to stop by this place on the way home. He gave me directions, and I drove up this long country road. It's about 1.5 miles into the middle of nowhere, and I just saw a cottage way in the distance, completely overgrown, and all around it was just, and I just looked and I went, well, yeah, it's just another piece of land. We've seen these before. And I drove away and I came home, and he said, what did you think? And I said, well, what am I to think? You know, we've looked at so many of these, and I wasn't getting my hopes up. And he kept kind of insisting that we go back again. And we came back one day and we literally walked the land, and it was almost, I'm 6 foot tall, and it was almost up to here on me with grasses. Like I just had enough vision to kind of see there, and we were kind of stepping, kind of not knowing where we were going. It was quite wild. The long and the short of it was, Robert finally said, will we get the real estate agent to come and show us around? And I said, oh, to hell with it, you know, because I really wasn't here. And so the real estate agent arrived, and it was all zoned for forestry. And he came up and he said, do you want to walk the land? And we said, no, thank you. We have walked the land. And we said, we'd like to see the cottage. And he looked at us like we were lunatics, because this is literally, there is nothing else. We are 1.5 miles up a bog road, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So he said, okay, I'll show it to you. And so he walked us around the back of the cottage, and the back side of the cottage, the roof is like that. And then there's a kind of an extension lower down, and the lower down extension has a gutter. And he put his hand up into the gutter and he pulled out a key. And the minute I saw the key, something in me just, it was like an electric charge going through me. I weep every time I do this. And he unlocked the door and we walked in. And at that stage, I had already fallen onto my knees and had remembered completely everything that had happened to Mount Shasta. And I knew that this was it. Whew. And it is 45 acres. It is now 38 acres in forestry that we planted, most of it native, as much as we were allowed to plant native trees. And it is an extraordinary, remarkable piece of land that, as I said earlier, is 10 miles from one of the most sacred, pivotal points of the ancient sacred points of Ireland. Most people in Ireland don't even know about Uisneach, which is the sacred site. You know, I mentioned it to my mother, and, you know, she goes on about the other sites. You know, she knows where everybody's heard of the Hill of Tara, and everybody's heard of Loch Gur, and everybody's heard of, you know, there are various others, and they've all heard of them, but she had never heard of Uisneach. And then I realized lots of other people didn't hear about Uisneach. And it's almost like it was kept contained. And I feel like I'm rambling, except I know that there's something here, so I'm going to keep going. But this land has become a place for other people to come and experience their connection with what is here, which is absolute pure nature. I mean, my front garden is just, there are hares running around all over the place. They're having babies in my labyrinth. You know, the pheasants come in here. We have woodcock and snipe and buzzards. I mean, the place is just literally flooded. Foxes wander through. It's just a living wildlife. And even though I don't know on a conscious sort of level what I'm connected to or how I'm connected, I was out digging an area this morning to put in wildflower seeds for the bees. And there were 2 robins dancing around me, a male and a female. And they were getting very, very cheeky. They were coming closer and closer and closer to where I was digging, obviously looking for worms. And I looked up at them and I said, oh, would you like me to give you worms? And it was like they stood to attention. And on one side, there were a lot of overhanging trees where they kept hanging out. And then on the other side of me, there's a small elder tree. And they kept dancing between the overhanging trees and the elder tree. And I found a point, kind of almost like a triangulation. And every time I dug up some of what I was digging and I found a worm, I would pick it up and I would go to that point and I would pop it down. And it was just extraordinary because the 2 robins just kept coming down and picking up my worms. And it's, you know, I don't know how to speak about this the way Kea does, but there is just, yeah, I suppose I live it without even having an awareness that I'm doing it. But the other thing is the fairy realm is very, very, very strong here. And you see, to me, everything is that realm. I can't separate it or me from it. Because when I'm out on the land with other people, when I say when I'm out on the land, I mean when I'm going to places that are sacred or that are thin spaces. And I actually believe that this place that we call Ballymac Lodge is one of those places. But it needed work, it needed clearing, and the town around us needed clearing. And when I was told it was yours to heal the heart of Ireland, they were talking about this little spot, like go to this little place and do what you have to do. So I find myself constantly going down by the river and just being in the water. Being in the water is really important for me. It isn't about going swimming. It's just, I have to be, and I don't know why I do it. I just know that I'll suddenly get a whim and I'll go, I have to go to the river, and I have to put my feet in the river or my hands in the river, or I have to put a crystal in the river, or yeah. And then the place that we lived just before we moved in here was immediately opposite what is known as a fairy fort. And it was a fort that was a man by the name of Goira used to live there, however many centuries ago. And funnily enough, the word Goira in the Irish language means laughter. And every time I would go over there, I would just find myself sitting on the bottom of that hill, literally falling about the place, laughing. It just bubbled up this joy. And then we went through kind of a dark period. It was kind of about 3 years into searching. And we were going through a bit of difficulty. The two of us were not getting along terribly well. And I used to go up to a room upstairs that overlooked this fairy hill. And I would literally call over to the fairy realm on the other side of the road, and I'd ask them to take me in. And I would, in my mind's eye, I would see them take me down into the mound and kind of put plants on me, like some kind of like ferns, or they kind of grow wild here. They're called bracken, but they look like a fern. And it's like they used to cover me and then sit by me. And I would tell them, you know, I need to be back in my body at such and such a time because I have something to do, or I have to be somewhere, you know, send me back at that time. And I would find myself just disappearing and going off into the fairy mound. I knew that I was being looked after by these beings. And then suddenly, 3:30, I needed to be somewhere at 4 o'clock. I'd find myself sitting in my chair and just this sort of shit-eating grin on my face going, oh, thanks. You know, that was what I needed. So, yeah. And then to go back to the Achill Island, Achill Beg, small island, because that ties back in with the Achill Island itself. The whole island is just everywhere you go. It's either water sprites or leprechauns, or I don't even know their names. I just use names other people give me. And it's not that I see them physically, but I sense them. I know that I'm with them when I'm with them. Then there's a different energy up there. There are quartz quarries on Achill Island, and there's a different sub-being. There's a different sense of beingness there. But the Achill Beg is a very profound place because its energy is unlike anything I've ever experienced, actually anywhere else in Ireland. But definitely it's completely different from the main island. And when Tantra ended up coming back to Ireland on another occasion, I was living in Achill at the time, and she came, and a group of people came all to stay on Achill. And we went out to this island, and it was so evident that the power, the elemental beingness that is out there was literally the power of the primordial mother. And she just ran this, she'd run people off the island. If people weren't in coherence with the energy of this little tiny island, literally they would be gone. They would either get bored or fall asleep, or they would be looking for the next boat back because they were just had to get off the island for whatever reason. But I later discovered, to add some science into it, that, or geology anyway, that there is a major fault line that actually runs below where the island is separated from the main island. And the other thing I discovered then when I started to look into more information around that was there are actually two synchronic lines coming from the, what I call the ganglion at Damanhur. If you follow the point from Damanhur temples, there are 4 specific lines that move out from the temples. 2 of those lines actually cross through Ireland. Both of them meet somewhere very close to either Avebury, Glastonbury, somewhere in that point, Stonehenge of England. And they kind of converge. They do their journey kind of up and over through parts of Europe and down France, and one of them goes up, and they kind of converge somewhere in that area. And then one of them goes slightly south and cuts down through the southeast of Ireland and kind of wiggles its way up through the counties of Cork, out through Kerry, which is where the largest number of sacred sites in Ireland are actually based, which is along the line of that synchronic line. The other line, which always has fascinated me, slightly north and cuts what is known as Northern Ireland off from the rest of the Republic of Ireland. It actually seems to cut through that line that separates the north of Ireland from the south of Ireland. And then it falls down slightly in a county called Sligo and follows down and cuts right through Achill Island. And I bet that if I was able to get that kind of channel of energy perfectly kind of aligned, it probably is that actual pass through between the main island of Achill and Achilbeg. So the whole thing is very, very tied in as well with the synchronic lines. And I was on Ishnock Hill a number of years ago when Crotolo came to build a spiral here. And I became aware of an energy I hadn't felt before. Normally, when I'm listening to the land, the energy tends to move in a particular direction, usually sort of up from the land or across something. But I was very present to, we were taken to a place I'd never been before. It's known as Lu's tomb. And they actually believe that someone called Lu, who is known as the sun god, but there actually is a tomb to Lu that they're only starting to explore now. But we were taken to the top of the mound, and I was just very aware that there was this weird sensation of hovering energy. And it felt like it wasn't coming from above and it wasn't coming from below. And I pointed it out to Crotolo, and he just gave me that, oh darling, you know, when two synchronic lines bump together, you know, they create this magnetic resonance or dissonance possibly. And it just, I suddenly realized, you know, I'd been thinking about synchronic lines like a pencil line. You know, God knows how vast the width of their channel is. And I realized that hill, Ishnock, and that the energy line that actually flows right down through our property here is literally in that point where these two synchronic lines actually, because they're quite close together. I mean, Ireland's a very tiny place. It's only about 350, 60 miles long. So, you know, considering the width of a synchronic line, it was just really interesting to get that insight there. I have actually no idea if I've given you any information about the elemental realm or the nature spirits.
Well, I just want to say, I just finished my last podcast on the spiritual physics book. And I don't know if you're aware, but in those last recent development chapter, they talk about the 7 scarlet doors as actual places deep in the land, libraries that we need to open to get access to the knowledge. So I was just listening to that as I was finishing the last podcast. So it's very possible that there in Ireland is access to these, at least some of the scarlet doors, these libraries of information.
Well, I think one of the clues to look for, particularly with Dom and her, is go see where they want to be, because that's where they're going.
So wait, say that again. Say that again.
I said some of the clues with Dom and her are to go and see where they want to be, because that will give a clue. I knew there was another reason that I had to bring Achill Island in, because in Dom and her,
I was going to add that if you didn't.
yeah, in Dom and her, this is the trouble with my mind. It kind of wanders and then it finds its way back to where it was meant to be. I apologize, but oh my gosh, it's snowing. Wow.
Yeah, it's raining here. It just started.
So there was a beach on Achill Island that about 33 years ago, now this is a couple of years ago, the 33 years was up. One day the sea came in. It was a beautiful beach, only a tiny little thing, but a beautiful beach. There were lots of beaches all over Achill. It is an island. And this particular beach, one day in a storm, all the sand disappeared, completely disappeared. So overnight the beach was gone. It was just this rocky shore, and it was actually quite steep because it shelved right down deep into the sea. So it wasn't a place that anybody really went, except maybe somebody might go fishing there. And Piovra, who was left in charge of many of the instructions of the magical operations after Falco died, was told that at a certain time, if a beach in Ireland, he didn't say where, if a beach in Ireland that had lost its sand 33 years before, if the sand returned and the beach returned, they were to go immediately to that beach to complete the 30-year process of the awakening of the goddess. And it's about 2 or 3 years ago now. We were actually in Damanhur when it occurred. Was that the year we became initiates, or was it the year before?
2019, I think that's right. 2019.
And Shama Viola came to us with great excitement to tell us that Piovra was in Ireland, because Shama has come here many times to give workshops. So she's visited here and stayed here at the property, and we've run the workshops from here. And she was highly excited to tell us that Piovra and a group of people were in Ireland because this beach in Achill Island had another storm, and overnight the sand had returned, and it was the final, it was the last direction that Falco had given for the completion of this piece of work of awakening the goddess. And this was done with a lot more secrecy than what they're now doing with the awakening of Pan, where everybody's involved. But it had as much importance, probably maybe even a little more, because it was a final piece of an essential element of bringing the 4 mother worlds together. So that actually happened. Piovra went to Achill and did this piece of work. Have they gone up to 5 mother worlds now? I'm just seeing Alessandra's giving a 5. I'm not sure. So that was another piece that felt it tied into the ramblings around Achill. But also the book Summer with the Leprechauns by Thomas Halliwell is actually based on Achill Island, and the cottage she stayed in and the pub that she describes and the places that they travel to is all part of this same island. So there's something really important in a sort of probably not important, but somehow in the elemental constructs of what's happening in the nature kingdom, that Acle has actually been very seminal to.
I think that's really well said, Anne. The thing is, in Ireland, it's a visceral experience. You see, what I do is I kind of translate my experiences. Anne lives them. So it's part of being in the landscape where it's easier for the communication to occur. I think that's why Tantra took people to Ireland so often. And that's one of the places I met Anne, was I was on a vision quest with Tantra. So I think
I want to thank you very, very much. I truly appreciate all what you've been sharing so much. Thank you to both of you. I'm thrilled. I'm all happy. It makes a lot of sense and it helps me to put things together. And I didn't know why I was here, but now I do. It's wonderful. And you had some, sorry?
Corinne, you and I met in Dominher by magic.
Yeah, by magic. Yeah, by magic. Yeah.
Now, are you all based in Canada?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I listened to some, I don't know, would you call them channelings? I'm not quite sure what they are, by a woman called Oracle Girl. And she has been talking about the absolute sacred importance of the waters of Canada for the evolution of planetary consciousness and for the elements, and particularly the Great Lakes, but all the water of Canada. And she talks about it carrying a very, very specific vibration that doesn't occur anywhere else on the earth at the moment. It's carrying this extreme purity. And so I just thought, I don't know why I thought some of you were from Canada. Are you? I think Alessandra.
I am from Canada, and I'm right next to the St. Lawrence River, which comes from the Great Lakes. So I'm just next to it. So
bathing it, drinking it, do whatever you can in it. It's really, 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 really powerful.
Wow.
Essence. Yeah.
Wow. And the place where I live is called the Nuns Island.
Oh,
wow, that's so fun.
Now you said a word, the crone, a face of a crone. I'm French speaking first, so I'm not sure what a crone is.
okay. Well, in the kind of traditional breakdown of the triple goddess, there is the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So the crone is the wisdom woman, usually after they've moved beyond childbearing age. You move into crone stage. Then there's the maiden, which is the birthing, and then the mother, who is carrying the creation. So the crone is often looked upon she shows up in fairy tales as a witch, and as you often, but there's always a wisdom in her. And yeah, when I say I saw the face of a crone, it was a face of an older sort of witchy looking face, but it was so clear to me it was crone energy. So
because I had a dream recently where there was those weird faces in a circle, and I was looking and I didn't know, but now I can maybe imagine that they were, they look like exactly what you're describing actually. But it was a circle. I was like looking at their faces.
It's like the grandmother's fire.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It's like the grandmothers sitting around the fire.
Well, it's interesting, Kea, when you started and you said you've got this blueprint of everything that's possible for us. And, these nature spirits are trying to get us to the blueprint and tending our inner gardens or our literal gardens to get us to the blueprint, and having these discussions. And Annie, you sharing these visions, all of a sudden we realize we've had these encounters. Some of us have had these sensations, but we don't trust them. But in Ireland, what was one of the things they said to you? It was yours to head the heart of Ireland. Isn't the place you're at where it's the center of all these fairy connections? Isn't that maybe the heart in a kind of way.
It's actually known. Yeah, I live bang in the center of the country and everybody calls it the heart of Ireland.
There you go. Like, it's so perfect. You're right there, but also for the nature spirits. And what you are experiencing, like what Kea said, you don't even realize, but you're living it, like with your robins and you're playing. I mean, those are things I read to my children's in the Red Wall series, you know, where you have
Oh my God, you read that to your children? I did too.
You know, and the cordials, you know, of the essences of the plants, you know, like, it's like you just want to. So these are the kind, this, Annie, is exactly what we need, and Kale was right. You embody it. You are in already harmony and in an open communication with the environment and the nature spirits, and you don't even think twice when things happen to you. And you just, by sharing, you remind us, right? Like Corinne said, you know, I have a dream. Yes, because they are all around us. We just have to, you know, open ourselves to remember, to remember. And you're living it. You're in touch with the land. You know, when you walk in, you know, the same. And it's interesting, you do sound. It's almost like these creatures are at a different frequency than us.
Yeah.
And the sound maybe is what can open the door so that we, if we were to resonate our inner crystal, if we were to vibrate at a higher frequency and possibly being attuned with the sound that either we make through bowls or internally, I don't, you know.
No, you do it with this. You do it with this. Your voice. With no judgment. You can't add judgment to it because the sound that you were born with is your frequency.
And so how do you access it?
You open your mouth and you go, ah.
And trust that that's the sound you need and let that frequency vibrate in you?
What I mean, one of the things that I actually love to do and love to show people how to do, even though there's very little showing in it. Part of the problem with it is that people have such an issue with their voice because most cultures, we've been closed down. We have been told to shut up or to not express ourselves. But the thing is, if you just allow sound to move out of your mouth, just, I mean, I'm looking out now at this wintry scene with snow and I'm just, I didn't plan that. I just let it move through me. So you literally open your mouth, but the thing to try and do is to keep working with a tone, and you may sometimes have to go up into your nose, or you may have to move it down into your body to find where it starts to actually, you can actually feel it resonating in your body. So when you make sound rather than sing, because singing usually requires words. Right. When you make sound, you bypass all the talk, you bypass all the story, you just go straight to your own frequency essence. And obviously, as our consciousness expands and rises and our frequency naturally rises, our sound will shift too. But we are born with a frequency, and when that frequency is in pure entrainment is what it's called.
Yeah. Right.
Everything in our body is doing this to its frequency. It's going, woo, this is who I am. It's like vibrating at its frequency. So your cellular system, your muscular system, your organs, everything recognizes this. And most of us go around silent. And I mean, I was part of the problem myself. I used to say it all the time because I trained as a singer. I was like, oh, well, I can't really sing, I can't really sing. But so many people have an issue with the word sing because they feel that it has to do with performance. But sound is essential. We wouldn't have been given a voice box if by whatever made this elemental being that we live in.
So do you think
it's utterly essential?
So if we are able to harmonize our internal sound and our own internal frequency, would that help us possibly to be a little more sensitive to these subtle beings, or more in resonance with them, and then they can communicate?
I think at a fundamental level, that is actually absolutely. And I think it's fascinating that you talked about photosynthesis, and I know what photosynthesis is from a sort of a very basic scientific point of view, but what is going on? I mean, those of you who've been in Damanhur have heard the plants singing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Damanhur have figured out how to give us the opportunity to hear the sounds that they produce.
Yeah.
But the other thing that they do in Damanhur is they sing back. They actually have concerts. They communicate in this way with them through sound. And it's one thing to speak, but our speaking just is not at the same frequency as our sound frequency.
I think language limits us, absolutely. And so
But
this
it's not even about the language. It's whatever way we use our voice to speak does not contain the complete resonance of the sound that we are designed to make. Your head is actually like a cathedral. If you open your mouth wide, there's a whole empty chamber in there. You've got all these cavities that are sinal cavities and all the chambers going through your head. They're resonators. This skull is like a solid structure. It's a resonator. So, and our spinal cord, when operatic singers and things sing and they get vibrato, what's happening is their spinal cord is actually, they aren't going, oh,
their spinal cord
their
is
spine starts to respond to the sound, and it creates this very pure sound.
I have been beside an opera singer and I could feel myself vibrating. He was right beside me singing, and I was just like, oh my God, like I thought it was going to vibrate me off the balcony.
But the thing is, without having to do opera, we can actually do this for ourselves.
That's what cats do, right? They're purring their whole, with that sound. Kitty cats, I've heard it's very healing to put on broken bones cats because of the purring, that sound, that oscillation of their sound that they make is probably oscillating their bones. And at
very possibly, yeah. I've always wondered what it was. I love it.
Yeah.
But I don't know why they do it. I always thought it was because they liked me, but I know that's not true.
I think that's true also.
Wow.
But you know what I mean, from a scientific point of view, there, but so and the other incredible thing to do is to it's just so natural to me, I don't even think about it, but as soon as I enter a body of water, I just start sounding. I just, and people just think, oh, Anne's singing again, kind of thing. But it's almost like, now that I'm having to speak about it, it's almost like my response to what I am in connection with within the water. I mean, Kay has heard me do it. I've done it in the White Spring. I do it. I love going into the White Spring and just jumping into the water and just.
And we sang into the White Spring Gate today, Susie and Sophie.
Oh, did you? Oh, lovely.
It's so funny. We stood at the gate, and that was the beginning of our little journey through the waters and with the yew trees and everything else.
So guys, that's what fairies do.
We go sing into springs, and oh my goodness,
because you're bringing the archetype in, you're shaping the water to the frequencies that it needs. You're with your beautiful sound, you're giving it, what did you call it, that attunement, right? That
yeah, I really truly believe that nature herself, itself, whatever pronoun you want, but that nature is so much more intelligent than we are. And that possibly I would be more inclined to think that I am being informed by the water rather than, well, there's obviously a two-way thing, but
Right.
I would never imagine that I got into the sea to balance the sea, whereas I leave the sea balanced.
Thank you. Thank you. That was
And
that was me being, in my head human, Thank you for clearing
well,
that.
it was, but I'm going to put something in there, and I don't may well be entirely wrong. For me, it's important too to make sure the human is an equal part of the equation, because I think part of the imbalance that we've had is that we've taken ourselves either so far out of it that then this arrogance shows up that we're too much of it. So I feel like to find that lovely center. So I would say the balance occurs in the meeting point of the human and the water, in which both are essential, and that the water benefits from that exchange and the human benefits from that exchange. And there oughtn't to be, and I don't know how to get over it in myself. And you're really like listening to raw feed here, but it's like as if we could come clean as a child and realize that we are the same as the water, and the water is us and we are the water. And we no longer carry well, the water is greater than us, or nature is greater than us, or the opposite. I'm greater than nature, I'm going to tell it what to do. So it's like how to find ourselves in that middle place and that meta point in our innocence, but not making ourselves small.
No, you absolutely, I agree.
Well, in Damanhur, they have the little gardens where people don't go, right? So that they can be pristine. And I think what I got from Anne is just the reverence, these.
It was perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect reverence. She just embodies it, which is great. I just love it.
I don't always look very reverent when I'm doing it.
And that's the innocence. See, again, it's the whole notion of what reverence should look like. Like I was starting to go after something else, which is kind of the way our human, like imposed cultural mind starts to tweak the balance, because it'll start to tweak us to, oh, well, it's the water or it's the something. And we take ourselves out of the equation. And I think that's the place where I feel like a real expansion and blooming can happen for human nature connections, is to start to be able to shed some of those habitual, like I either have to be greater than or lesser than, and I have to do it a certain way, and if I don't do it this way, it won't work. It's like what Anne said about singing.
Well, one of the things, you're reminding me of that kind of sense of imbalance is that there is so much work to do on this land just to keep certain areas clean. Now, I have left a whole section of the specific. Now, there's a lot of wild land outside us. It's known as commonage. It's owned in common with about 100 other people. It used to be bog, and it was land where people who owned a part of the commonage had what they called turbary rights, which means they were allowed to dig the turf. But we've got 22 acres of that all around our actual property. And it's kind of no man's land. But I was very specific about leaving a piece of the land that we actually had purchased as a little area that I just don't go into. I think I've been into it maybe twice, but I kind of tell people, oh, that's kind of a no-go area. Like I haven't made it specifically a garden or anything, but it's just, I'm not going to interfere in there. But one of the things that I have often found, and again, I know it's a response to the, I suppose, elementals of the plants or the trees. There is a practice here where machines come around. They're like a big machine on a tractor, and it's got this huge blade, and they go around and they literally put out the blade and they just cut the top off everything, and it splits and tears, and it is so physically painful to me that I just, it upsets me so deeply. But even working here, on the garden. For a couple of years, I didn't do anything here because every time I put my spade into the ground and I was cutting up a weed or a piece of bark off a tree, or I hit it with the lawnmower, I actually felt, oh my God, you know, all I'm doing here is damaging, you know, damaging these beings. And, you know, and I had this terrible kind of anxiety around causing, because this place is so beautiful and so natural. And we came in and built a house in the middle of it, and, you know, but yeah, and it's actually a process that I am in the process of trying to desensitize myself from feeling that level of angst about being harmful, because ultimately it goes back to Paralandra always saying that anything a human takes on as a project, regardless of what it is in the nature spirit's opinion, a garden. But because I'm physically working in a garden, you know, I have to be aware that the nature spirits get that too. But I did an awful lot of work with another woman, a really, really extraordinary woman, and she got an awful lot of her training from, what's the name of the man? The Steiner, Rudolf Steiner. And I put the name of the book up there that she has written, and her name is Susan Raven, and she is quite
amazing,
an extraordinary woman. And I bonded with her. She used to be one of the singers for Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, if anybody remembers that band. And when she got burnt out, she just went down inside herself, and she ended up going on a couple of these Steiner courses and got it completely altered her life. And she actually was doing, when I met her, she was doing extraordinary work around tree diseases and asking the nature intelligences to show her how and why these tree diseases were occurring. And at one point, she actually, because she hadn't really been working with the system in the sort of pure way that she should have, she kind of overstepped the mark and ended up actually in connection with the disease, which she said was not a pleasant experience. She won't be doing that again. But her work is absolutely brilliant. And I'm just gonna, I know it's backwards on the screen, but this is Susan Raven. Again, her name comes up further down, and it's Nature Spirits, the Remembrance, a Guide to the Elemental Kingdom. But her work is really profound, and it is based using the systems, if you like, of Rudolf Steiner. So that's just another little reference point, if that helps.
It helps, and I appreciate the synchronicity, because my sister adopted a little girl. Her name is Raven, and she's Aboriginal. And I have a question for everyone. I have a tree, a ficus tree, and it's inside the home. I've had it for 20 years, and it's becoming like it's losing a lot of leaves at the moment. And it's the first time that I can't get in connection with spirit. It's not telling me. So I was wondering if you have anything to share that could maybe help me to have a communication. Before I would hear all his messages, and nothing at the moment happening. So
is it coming naturally to the end of its life, and that's that you're just not being able to connect because it's coming to its completion process?
It's strange, because I've been singing, you know, like, don't know why I sit there and I start singing like you were saying, and then I start crying, and I think, okay, are you saying goodbye? You know, so it could be, and I'm denying it. Yeah.
I'll keep singing to it regardless.
Okay. Thank you so
because
much.
Even if its life force is leaving, the connection is still there. And I believe it's probably like a human body. We drop our body, but we don't go anywhere. You know, our essence is eternal. So I don't know. Is that the same? Has this been discussed? Is this the same with other living entities?
I would think that I had.
Can't hear you, Alessandra.
And you know, Kea shared her experience with the trees. I had an experience in India where Can you guys hear me? Because I've got my earphones.
Not
No.
very well.
Oh,
Not
can you
very
hear me?
well.
Is that better? Is
Yeah.
that better?
Yeah, much.
Yeah.
And like, you know, Kea's experience where she felt like she was the tree, I felt that I fell into this consciousness of the tree, and it was huge. So my impression, interpretation of that is that it is one collective consciousness. So these are offshoots and they're very individual, but they do come from one collective. Probably like us, we come from the real, right? We're all in little pieces here, but in the real, it's all part of one. So that was an experience that I translated in that way. And like with Kea, I had done an ayahuasca journey, and I had felt inside my body, besides my veins, were these green veins that were tree, not tree, but plant. So I got a very strong feeling that we embody inside our own physical matrix, the plants. They're with us. We just need to remember, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of this. So, and these, yeah. So
I'm trying to remember the have you listened to it? You've listened to a few of Oracle Girl's calls, haven't you, Kea? She talks
Yes,
about,
in fact, I listened to the Canadian Waters one. It was fantastic.
but she talks about the for some reason the words just aren't coming to me at the moment. She talks about the overall, she has a word for the intelligence that is the whole of nature, including us. And she talks about the whole thing. It's like some sort of a nature intelligence system. And it's almost like we're a different being to a plant being, and we're a different being to a tree being, and we're a different being to a dog or a cat or whatever. But because we're all part of, or at least playing a part in this nature system, that the nature system and everything included in it is all one. There isn't any separation between any single, even it doesn't separate us out even as different species. It is just this nature intelligence that is everything that occurs in nature, regardless of whether people call it good, bad, you know, ugly, beautiful, whatever. It's just, it is, we are all part of this overall nature intelligence. So yeah, which I suppose it's very similar to the Damanhurian idea of reconnecting the mother worlds. It's like bringing us back into the cohesive consciousness of that connection.
And they also say very deliberately that unless we bridge with the other worlds, we're not going to be able to achieve this higher level of enlightenment. We need to return to that. So what this Oracle Girl is describing, I would say, in the Damanhur Spiritual Physics book, because some of us have studied that here together, is the real. And then there's all the fragmentation through the different layers of the material, the parallel universes, the over universes, the shadow world, you know, it's multi-layered. But at the source, it's exactly what she says. There's just one source and it creates everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know, it's all part of the same.
And maybe that tracks back to what I was even trying to say about the relational field between human and the rest of nature, is we need an innocence about it, because we are that, and everything is that, and everything is a unique and essential part of it. And part of the distortion, the aberration, as we call it in Tantra Mat world, is that we tend to think of, because our perception is one of the archetypes we carry. We observe, we can put things into language. We are scripture. We have a specific role that other forms of nature don't have. We sound, like Anne was saying, we make sound in a specific way that other aspects of creation don't do. that very thing that is our strength is also the place where I think we get tangled. Because then we turn it on ourselves. It got aberrated to where we turned it on ourselves, and then there's an inner aberration that judges and separates. But it's a very complex thing, because it's not an easy. It's like somehow it's a unity thing of bringing both those sides together, not a, trying to get rid of or eliminating something. So that's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't have any answers. I'm just putting it into the mix of the conversation, because I think it's so fascinating to really explore the essence of the question of, is it really in cleaning or clearing something in our perceptive field that's keeping us from feeling unified with the nature spirits, because we think of it in a certain way, that's actually also an impediment. And it's not even ours, but it's something upon us that we need to be aware and try not to invite in all the time.
But it's remembering those experiences, like Alessandra's experience with feeling at one with the tree, and your experience, because I can say in certainty, in a very conscious way, I once experienced that. And I was just walking along a street, making my way to my mother's house, and I passed a bush. It was just a bush over, somebody's wall was about maybe 4 feet high, and this bush was slightly up over and I stopped to admire something in the bush, and literally it was this like complete expansion, merging. I don't have language for it. And I've been waiting for the rest of my life for that to happen again. I can go, why isn't it happening? But the fact is that whatever state I was in as I passed that tree, or whatever frequency we both happened to be in at the same time, we entrained with each other. And it's like our frequencies matched and just merged. So
can you imagine, Annie, if we always had that connection, and what our daily experience of life would be when we were more whole? Because then we would,
I think it would be like having perfect pitch. Sometimes it would be absolutely fabulously beautiful, and other times it would slightly get on your nerves if anything showed up that wasn't in that realm, that just went.
That's true.
And beautiful ladies, today we're all ladies here today. That's why these discussions are important. So we all start to open up those little neurons and realize, right, those experiences that are subtle in our dream, or we don't give attention to, all of a sudden become more in focus. And we start to reconnect to this essence of who we really are. Then we would be invincible. I mean, no wonder they had to split us into parts, right? Because it's like, these guys otherwise are going to succeed, so it's going to break them apart. No, we're going to sew it back together. Or we're going to sound ourselves back together.
That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Annie, did you do your meditation yet for our group? Did you do that? Did you volunteer to do the meditation for the meditation group yet?
No.
Can I ask you maybe to go to the top of the line and share the sounding with us and the importance, because it's so needed right now. We need to bridge with the nature spirits if we're going to rock this place the way we need to.
What I'm going to say right now is that I will think about it, because I've been deliberately avoiding putting myself up there to do that. I've been in a bit of a cocoon for a while, and
do you want to practice with us right now? Give us just a little taste, and then you can feel your legs, and then you can do it. There's 50 of us. I would love it. I would love it, because I want to start walking around doing this.
Well, to be honest, what I'd prefer to do is to guide you into it yourself, so that you can feel it in your body.
Yeah, let's do that. Guys, are you game? So she can practice, and then she can do it for the group. And there's 50 of us, and we all need to start vibrating this, because I had a very interesting chat with a very special person today. And we're very concerned, especially here in Ontario with our lockdowns. And I said to her, I go, look, if these vaccines are really not good for people and this virus is doing its thing and it's going to do all these mutations, what if we just vibrate ourselves to a higher frequency? Then they will be null and void, right? We just have to up the level of harmony, like resonance, right? Then we won't even feel them. They can be there, but they won't bug us. She goes, yeah, that's possible. So I think this might be what we need to do. So teach us. Are you guys game? Give me a thumbs up.
Yes, please.
Well, what I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I have to go though, shortly after 7 because I have another commitment I have
oh,
to
I
be.
didn't realize it was so late either. I
Okay,
haven't.
you got 5 minutes. She can do this for 5 minutes. Let's go.
I'm going to suggest that you turn off your sound because it'll just get distorted, and the only sound you want to hear is your voice. So just start by really planting.
I'm gonna cry.
Oh.
I'm gonna cry.
Just really plant your feet on the ground. Just really feel the pressure of your feet connecting to the ground. And bring your hands just down. We're all women, so I can say this. Bring your hands down kind of in a V so that the fingers meet just below your pubic bone. So in that gap between your legs, so that your hands are actually sitting in the crest of your leg, either side of your pubic area, and just bring your hands to the point where you naturally come to a point at the bottom of your body. And I want you to bring your breath into the lowest point of where your fingers are. So breathing in through your nose, right down into that point in your body. And really feel the expansion as it moves all the way down through your body. Feel parts of you expand, even if you're only imagining it, that you've never actually witnessed expanding before. So become aware of the muscles in your back, particularly your lower back, and in your sides, below your diaphragm, in your rib cage, and then just releasing the air as fully as you can so that you feel your hands drop back in towards your pubic area. And then breathe in again. Deeper, and feel a wider expansion. And then again, releasing and just being really aware of what parts of you are breathing, what parts of you are moving in your body. And then the third breath, deep breath right down into that lower region of your body. And just open your mouth, just really relaxed, and drop your tongue so that it's flat, and just let out whatever sound comes. An ah is usually an easy one, and let the breath fall out on the ah. So just ah, like a long sigh. And then you'll find your body's air will evaporate. And so just naturally allow it refill. And again, ah, whatever that sounds like, doesn't matter. And your body will naturally collapse and let the air naturally fill up again. But each time you fill up, just feel it fill up with just a little bit more air. And then, ah. So the next time your body refills, just find a tone or a pitch. It doesn't matter if it doesn't hold, but just try and find an area in your body that this tone actually moves or sings to. Just listen for a slight vibration. So rather than doing it like a heavy sigh, you're going to try and maintain the tone. So let the breath go out again, bring it back in. let it move till no air is left in your body. And then just let your body naturally refill. That's what it does when it runs out of breath. And again, ah, and yawning is good. It can often happen. That just means you're getting more oxygen into your blood. But just continue to do this. Just as the air goes out on the sound, let the body refill naturally and let the air go again. And as the sound is moving, start to listen to where in your body is responding. When I do this, I personally am feeling that down around my sacral chakra, just below my belly button. But you may feel it in your throat. You may feel it in your head. You may feel it in the back of your neck. It depends on what pitch you take, because if you go on a higher pitch, ah, it'll resonate somewhere slightly different. If you change the vowel, if you change it to an O, I'm feeling a huge clearance up around my ears and down around this part of my chest. So it's going to be different every vowel you use. So those A, E, I, O, and U, and just play with it. Play with the breath in and just start to feel where in the body it feels. And then just as more air comes into your body, you're going to find the tone gets stronger and stronger, and you'll start to hear overtones. After a while, you'll start to hear other tones in your own tone. And when you get into, when the other tones start going, you know that you're actually resonating multiple parts of your body. So that's a very short introduction to sound in your body.
Wow, it brought me to my waters. It brought me to the waters. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. That was very, very beautiful. Very beautiful. We are really perfect alchemical labs. Huh? This was so rich. You two are stellar. I feel so blessed. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting us to be part of this, because it's just like a little piece of treasure, you know. And I'm just sorry we didn't get to hear more from you guys as well, because there's much that you can feed us with.
I knew it was going to be rich. I didn't know if it was how rich it was going to be. I mean, I could keep going. There's so many questions I want to ask you, Annie, and but I think it's enough. You know, we don't want to saturate. But
It's good. Yeah, and
Yeah,
unfortunately,
and it's the time, because I actually have something at 7, so.
yeah,
No,
you're
no,
something
no,
and
no,
I have
no.
something close after. So yeah.
So we're going to try to get this other lady that Eva knows, and then maybe, and we could do maybe a follow-up. So give us a couple of weeks. Then I'm going to be on the road for for a while. But I was like, oh, yeah. I hope these guys are going to watch over me. Those spaceships over here.
That's great.
And everywhere you meet your Canadian water, plunge, drink, just adore it. You're so blessed.
And I am going to get in, you know, instead, I'm going to be much more conscious when I get in the water to be in, you know, in symphony with it, or in symbiosis with it. Yeah, beautiful.
Sing.
I'm gonna actually, I was thinking as I'm driving, I'm gonna make all kinds of sound, and I'm gonna get to know what frequency is vibing, you know, and then I'll see what happens to me on the road. I'll keep you guys posted my research. Wow, the fairies are gonna pop out of the and keep the moose off the roads, so I'm fine. Oh, beautiful. Kea, Annie, thank you really from
Thank you.
all of us.
Bless
It
you
was
all.
awesome.
You,
What a
Thank you.
divine
You
appointment.
all.
I think it was.
yeah,
Magical.
yeah, thank you. There's going to be more of this, and you really planted some beautiful seeds for us to work with. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, good luck. What great work you're all up to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Inspiring.
Yeah, we all are enriched.
Yeah. Good baile. Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Ciao, everybody.
Much
Ciao.
love.
Bless you.
Oh,
Come
and convoy. Corinne, stay on so we can chat.
Convoy.
Convoy. Ciao, Annie. Thank you. Thank you. You pulsed that hard in Ireland. So beautiful. Ciao. Wasn't that stellar?